how much you get pushed towards growth in the beginning part of your life is what gets the ball rolling. Okay, this is too many coincidences. It can't be just my imagination at this point.
Welcome to our latest episode, where we have the privilege of hosting a remarkable guest, the creator behind the popular YouTube channel Hoe Math. Known for his insightful and unique take on the cognitive processes behind dating in the Western world, Hoe Math combines his background in developmental psychology with a creative flair for illustration. Through his compelling use of scribbly diagrams, he offers viewers a deeper understanding of social, personal, and interpersonal dynamics. As a viral content creator, not only on YouTube but also on TikTok, he has captivated a wide audience by addressing intersexual dynamics, psychology, and the nuances of the dating market. Join us as we delve into his perspectives and explore the thought process behind his innovative content.
I am an internet weirdo who got really popular very suddenly with a viral video. I use my skills in communication and drawing and developmental psychology to explain very simply concepts about dating and psychology and other parts of our everyday lives that are very useful to people in as much as they can watch a short video and say, oh, is that how it works? Now I get it, and then apply it to their lives. I've become very popular because of my ability to do that, and I talk mostly about the subconscious and dating and how people work and explaining what is really going on beneath the surface.
Awesome. That's a really good description.
Yeah.
So, Jordan, would it be fine if I ask the first question?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Go ahead, man.
we'll just
Go
start
ahead.
the discussion there. So, we saw your video on levels and dealing with those levels of consciousness, which you claim are very important. Does modern education help at all? And if not, how can it be fixed to help people increase their consciousness?
Sure. So the modern education system isn't really designed all that much around the realities of developmental psychology in as much as I can recognize it. I would say my personal experience of the public education system definitely had some recognition of the developmental levels of the children, being spoken to. Definitely had, people naturally do this. So, for example, the game Peekaboo, where you hide the face and then show the face and hide the face and show the face. This is something that people naturally do without being educated about object permanence. They kind of remember on almost an ancestral level. I used to not have object permanence. So if I show myself and hide myself and show myself and hide myself, it will teach this child that I'm here even when the child can't see me. So in that sense, education does include some recognition of developmental levels, but as far as I've seen, I don't think that the public school system is doing a very good job of understanding developmental psychological theory and then applying it, especially as you get into the higher grades like junior high and high school. That's when there's a lot more divergence between what level people are in. I've seen a lot of high school kids, even back in the 90s when I was in high school, some get all the way up to level 6, and some of them are still stuck down in level 3. And there are so many that it's so different what works for those different groups of people. And I see in education, or saw in education, because I haven't been interacting with it for quite a while, but I saw so much bluntness in the way that they had a one-size-fits-all. This is the one thing we do for a large chunk of students, and don't evaluate them. We're not evaluating their development. We're not evaluating their IQ. We're not evaluating their personality style, their type, their MBTI, or their Big Five, or whichever one you might think is valid. And that one-size-fits-all approach, I think, is very blunt, and it's leaving a lot of human capacity on the table. Yeah. And I think that could be solved with a competent developmental psychological approach, or partially solved at least.
Yeah, just as a follow-up, do you think these levels of consciousness matter more as someone ages more in life and gets out of the education system?
It's hard to answer the question, does it matter more? I think that your level of development matters in as much as where you are placed in life. So the levels that you're thinking at, the level at which you're developed to, that you can get to on a daily basis, it matters in terms of what is your position in life and what are you bringing to that position. So when you, for example, if you have a teacher or a judge or a politician who is thinking at a more conventional level, like a stage 4, like a lot of people are at level 4 in medicine and law and politics. And it's just this sort of, this is the way we've always done it, so this is the way we're always going to do it. And that brings a great lack of adaptive ability to these things that really require much higher level. So it's not age as much as it is what position is a person in. More important in higher level positions demand a higher level of consciousness, or else they're going to be unable to face the challenges of modern life and postmodern life and whatever is next. So to answer the question in the most direct way possible, recognizing development is good for moving development along. And that happens more in young life. Like, we all know, we've all heard, by the time you're 25, your brain is frozen or whatever, you're done becoming who you're going to be. So how much you get pushed towards growth in the beginning part of your life is what gets the ball rolling. And I believe, this is why this question is so hard to answer, because I believe I had some teachers and I was in some programs that definitely got the ball rolling for me. And by the time I was 16 years old, I already found change to be an important thing. And I think I viewed that as common at the time because, I was still in a stage where I thought my experience is probably similar to everyone else's experience. But the idea of change being something that you want to make a constant in your life, I think is something that not a lot of people ever really figure out or value, never mind school kids. And I think if we made that more normal, then people would be, a lot of the things that we don't like about people in general would be different. People would be less sticky. They would be less stuck in place. They would be more able to understand others and adapt to new situations, which is for sure what we need in an age where you can get on the internet and talk to someone in China and get on an airplane and fly to wherever.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Awesome. Jordan, I know you want to comment on that, so if you want to go ahead
Yeah.
and you
Well,
can
what I
proceed
was
to the
going
next
to ask
question.
is, what I was going to ask you, you're talking about the development of, children and teenagers nowadays. Do you think that we're sort of, because I see many people say this, both laymen, both scholars. Do you think that this new generation, I'm speaking here of Generation Z and even to an extent Generation Alpha, even though we haven't
Mhm.
fully witnessed how they'll develop, do you think that they're plagued by this tendency towards just sort of going with the motions,
Mhm.
living the moment rather than thinking of long-term plans, long-term career and personal development? Because what I'd say is, it seems like if you ask the average sort of teenager or even a person in college nowadays why they're studying what they're studying, why they're doing something, it's not very intentional. I know
Mhm.
this sounds almost kind of mystical, but do you think that there is this crisis of just immediate self gratification that's
Mhm.
instant, this preference towards instantaneity? And I know that's obviously contributes to a decline in attention spans, a decline in the ability to focus, to produce great, intellectual and creative works. What do you think is the broader effect of all of this, of these interrelated phenomena on culture, on society?
Yeah.
What do you think overall?
For sure. So I was just on another podcast yesterday talking about this, where we got to exactly the same question. And what we decided is that there was a crisis of immaturity. And I think that it is, I haven't seen any measure of it other than IQ. Like IQ has fallen globally at an absolutely terrifying rate in the last 30 years. But I'm not aware of any developmental testing that would go along with it, although I'm pretty certain that they would match. I do believe, just from casual observation and from talking to others making casual observations, like it's anecdotes, but it's a hell of a lot of anecdotes. I do believe that we're in a very serious maturity crisis, and a lot of kids are growing up. When I was a kid, my grandparents would say the TV rots your brain, because they saw people before television and people were thoughtful and patient and reasonable. And then they saw people after television, and people just wanted immediate gratification, and they just repeated things that they heard on TV, and they said, "Oh, the TV makes you stupid and crazy." And now we're seeing like iPad kids, where the kid grows up looking at a flashing screen all day because the parents are busy at work and they've got to pay their taxes, and it just is flashing the most stimulating possible things at like a baby. and the baby just kind of grows up with that being reality. And I think that it kind of is a it's like a reciprocating problem. It's an iterative problem because the parents don't recognize how bad this is for the kid, because they're not really aware of how development works, and they figured as long as the kid is busy seeing something, let's put some shapes on there, then the kid will grow up fine. Because I grew up fine, and I had TV, and this is basically like a TV. I think that they're not really understanding the effect that this has on arresting development. These kids are now growing up, and a lot of people are reporting that they have like these dead stares, and they don't really recognize other people and their needs, and they view everything like it's an iPad, and they just go, "Do you have something interesting to tell me? No? Well, then I'm just going to turn around and look somewhere else." I'm not sure to what extent that's true and to what extent it is harmful, but for sure, I think since the invention of television, and since the invention of cable television, and then the internet, and then iPads and phones and everything, I think we're facing a crisis of maturity where people are sucking on these digital pacifiers instead of growing up and having real challenges. Like the online content is designed not to challenge you. It's designed to either give you what you want immediately or make you angry immediately so that you comment. And people are just stuck in these reaction cycles, which I might be able to pull that one up. They're stuck in these immediate reaction cycles where you see a thing and then you react to the thing, and then you're either satisfied or you're uncomfortable, and so you just move on. There we go. That's the 1, 2, 3. The see the thing, man bad, and then look for where man bad in life, and then act on it. Yell at man, and then back to the phone. And it's just nobody ever gets up to this point where it's like, should I be like that? Is this a good way to live? So I do think that there's been, a proliferation of culture and technology that have been discouraging people from developing appropriately, and I would love to see formal testing on it.
Interesting. Then, well, to follow up to that question, that was a very, very insightful response. To be a bit more maybe conspiratorial about this, do you think that this could at all be the result of an intentional push?
For sure.
Could this actually be? Has this just happened on accident? Is a sort of accidental byproduct of capitalist growth and technological progress, or do you think that perhaps there are actually very powerful people, elites, the corporations that run these entertainment companies like Netflix and Instagram and TikTok and all of these powerful people?
Yeah.
Do you think that they could be pushing this on purpose to essentially to placate and sedate the population?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are people who are allergic to that word conspiracy, and if you say it's a conspiracy, they shut their brains right off and they say there could never be any such thing as a conspiracy. The reality is that everything is a conspiracy. Everything. You go to the grocery store, there's been a conspiracy to put those products in front of you. You go to the courthouse, there was a conspiracy to write the laws that govern your life. Like, everything is a conspiracy. So when we are talking about conspiracy, we have to differentiate between, there's like this cartoonish version of a man in a like a robe, like this character, with the dark eyes and the under the hood, and they're all in rooms with wands doing magic spells. I'm not necessarily sure that it's those people doing it, but for certain, there are people who understand the effects of the technology on people. And it's like in Fight Club, they say that they have the cars. The guy works for an insurance adjuster or something, and if they make a car that has a defect and the defect is killing people, they multiply the car exploding. What is the cost of a settlement multiplied by how many times will they have to do it? And if that is lower than the cost of the recall, then they don't do one. So they if it costs less to let people die, they let people die. This is in reality how a lot of capitalistic decisions are made. CEOs have to make decisions about whatever, not letting their workers go to the bathroom if that's what makes more profits. People are like Pfizer, I think, is the most sued company of all time because they keep releasing products that kill people. There was just that Ozempic recently. There's been so many weight loss pills that always hurt people. And yet every time they come out with a new weight loss pill, they put it in the commercials and people go, oh, this one must be fine. They take it and they get hurt. Everything is conspiracy. So when we're talking about content, online content, television content, and how it affects people, 100% yes, they have a very advanced understanding of how that works. I mean, I studied it in college. You can take courses on, you can get a PhD in persuasion, and you learn the principles about what to show people, what words do you use, what colors do you use even, and what effect does that have on persuading them. They find out what those things are, then they design them and put them in front of you, and then you think things that you think are your own thoughts, but are actually coming from the hooded robe character there. So yeah, it's a conspiracy. It's 1,000 conspiracies, 1,000,000 conspiracies. It's conspiracies within conspiracies, but knowing where they're coming from and what the contents are is impossible, because the whole point of those things is keeping them quiet. So if we were going to combat something like that, we would need really, really broad sort of laws. We would need legal. This is why I talk about the government all the time. If we were going to combat the effect that this technology has on rotting people's brains and causing the immaturity crisis, you would need really broad laws on what's allowed and what's not. People talk a lot about how in China they don't show the kids, butts and boobs and swear words and, cartoon characters. The Chinese TikTok has science and nationalism. Like, China's great and everything. What you show people is what they become. What you put on here is what you get in here. And people don't want to believe that. People are too proud to believe that. They want to think that they can look at something and then make up their own minds, and it's broadly not true. So, on the one hand, yes, it is conspiracy upon conspiracy upon conspiracy. On the other hand, no one's ever going to have the power to know what they are and how they work. Like, we're not going to be able to point people out and say, oh, it's coming from this place. Like how they talk about TikTok going to the Chinese Communist Party and that having sure, that's not a good look, but what effect is it having exactly, and what are they doing exactly? It's really just speculative.
I see. Interesting. Well, then, I think that raises the question of, is there a means of resistance then to this conspiracy? I mean, individually, culturally, society, how can we combat this in any way? I mean, do you think it can even be overturned or reversed at all? Or...
I think that, oh God, it's such a big question. The way that I'm resisting it is just by showing people how their own minds work. And I'm showing them, and I'm even using, tricks of the trade to get people to think in ways that they didn't think before, to show them how they can be made to think in ways that they didn't think before, so that they can become aware of the effects of media on their mind. That's how I'm trying to help. The only way that I think we can get around the effects that these things have on us are creating very viral spreads of culture that get people away from this sort of thing, or by changing it at the source, which we don't have the power to do. This is billions and billions, trillions of dollars behind getting people to think certain things and act certain ways. So I'm just trying it from the ground up. I'm trying to, as much as possible, get a following of people who understand things like I made a video about Sex in the City and how it persuades people that they should be like the main character, which is if you live like that, your life has a very low chance of turning out well. But they make her seem sexy and cool and smart and fun and strong, and so people model that. I'm just trying to, as much as I can, get people to understand how that works so that they can get it out of their own lives and perhaps warn other people. but without any institutional power. I'm like that parable of the kid throwing starfish back in the ocean. There's a big wave that washes starfish up, and there's a kid throwing them back one by one, and the old guy goes, "You'll never get them all," and he picks up one and he goes, "I got that one. I'm just trying to get a few starfish right now."
I see. Perfect. That's a perfectly noble goal. Well, in that case, I'll pass it to Flying Kabbalah, actually, because I know he wants to ask a question about this.
Sure.
Yep, thank you. So obviously this is a very heavy and expansive topic, and that goes into a lot of sections of today's society, and obviously one section of society that a lot of these elements of decline expand into is the dating market.
Yeah.
Where obviously the dating dynamics get affected by these corpocratic and capitalistic tendencies. So could you go on and tell us how the dating market or dating dynamics are being affected by all of this decline?
Sure. So I'm going to ask for a little clarity on that question. How is the dating market being affected by this decline? You mean this same topic, like people's minds being affected by the technology? How's that being affected?
Generally speaking, because we were you did mention that there was a crisis of maturity.
Immaturity, yeah. Yeah, for sure. So I think that people are making a lot more short-sighted, short-term decisions than they were before. And I think that, I've used dating apps, and I've been successful on them, and I've been unsuccessful on them. I sort of aged out. There was a time where they were working so well for me that I thought that we had just fixed the future. I thought, oh, hey, technology fixed everything. The world is good now. And then later on in my life, I saw, this is what happens for people who are not in the prime, age, prime category. So we've destroyed the future, Without both of those perspectives, it's hard to really see what the technology is doing to people. It's causing people to generate entire worldviews based around these experiences that are entirely novel. These are new things. There are entire classes of men now who can live like kings and just have more sexual options than 99.9% of men in the past. And people who live their lives believe their lives to be normal. That's the default state. When you think something or you feel something, you think everyone thinks it. It's like that. I'm trying to think of the example. It's escaping me right now. But there are sometimes things that people think everyone does, and it's only them. And there are sometimes people think there's something that only they do, but it turns out to be everyone. People tend to think that what their beliefs are commonly shared. So we have people who are, again, growing up with this immediate access to everything and thinking everybody is living that way. And then when they hear, hey, some other people are, being harmed by this, it's that kind of baby boomer mentality of you do it yourself. It must be your fault. It's your personal weakness that's making that happen to you. And I think that it's pretty clear to me that the dating world is less happy than it ever was, and people are getting married less, and it seems like they're staying together for shorter periods of time, and they are there's more young men are virgins or involuntarily celibate than in recent years, and that's not a good sign. They're going to be upset about that. They're going to drop out of society, which they are. They become unproductive and even destructive in those cases. And I think that that overall effect of sort of polarizing the dating landscape from it used to be you used to have local economies of whoever you knew. There would be some popular people and some less popular people, and some people would never have any success. But now it's been, nationalized almost. It's been brought to such a large scale, like a citywide or a countrywide scale, that there are some people who don't even have a hope at normalcy, and there are some people who are so awash in success that they're out of touch with reality. And I think people are making more destructive short-term choices than ever before. And I think that that's a part of, like, dating and sex is how we create the next generation. And if you create the next generation in a stupid way, it doesn't come out smart. Like, we're creating another step down in overall human quality by living poor quality dating lives. So I view it as erosive towards the, if that's a word, eroding towards the substance of humanity itself, that we're relating to each other in this very shallow, repetitive manner.
Well, thank you for these very insightful insights in that regard. I'd like to pass the microphone now to Jacob.
Mm-hmm.
Hi again. You may have noticed that throughout this podcast, as we have asked you more and more questions, and a lot of the time when you make these insights, we actually agree with them. And I find a lot of the reason for why our views are similar and why we invited you on here to be that behind all of these sociological and psychological phenomena that we are talking about, there is a common perspective of the world and how modern society is developed and the direction that we're heading in. That's mostly the point of our little movement, our little channel. We're sort of analyzing these things and trying to find out where these symptoms of modernity come from. So I remember sort of researching more into your channel and watching one of your live streams, and you mentioned your views on democracy in general. So, sort of to expand on a broader topic here, because we make a lot of videos on specific philosophers like I believe Nick Land, Julius Evola, and you did comment that if there is an intermediary between sort of a benevolent despot and democracy, which is more like mob rule, then it would be good to have the intermediary where people with higher levels of consciousness are the ones making decisions. But is that feasible? Is it possible to put people in charge that wouldn't abuse that power and that would use it for the benefit of other people?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I don't know if it's possible because the founding fathers of the United States tried to do that, and now it's this. It didn't work out. They created exactly that system where they used metrics to select only the people who really could understand what was going on. They said you have to be this kind of person, you have to be educated, landowning, you have to. The reason that they never talk about this today. They say that you had to own land because they were classist or whatever, but the reason that they did that was because you have to have skin in the game. You can't be allowed to make decisions about a country when you don't own a part of it. Like, your family has to live here. It has to matter to you what happens to the country. This is one of the reasons that I'm so upset about people just moving in and getting citizenship the next day and then making all these decisions and then just going back where they came from. It's like they don't have any skin in the game. They're not invested in the future of the country. They're parasitizing it. So the founding fathers tried to use principles to isolate only the people who were number one, capable of rational thinking on a consistent basis, two, educated about history and about the ways that the world works and about human beings and how they work, and three, motivated to fight for the good of the nation. And regardless of that fact, there was a story, I'm not sure if it's a true story, but I think it was Benjamin Franklin who came out after they were drafting the Declaration of Independence or the Constitution or something, and they said, some woman ran up to him, some woman in a bonnet, one of these things ran up to him and said, "Sir, what have you given us?" Right? And he says, "A republic, ma'am, if you can keep it." And that "if you can keep it" is they knew what happened when you made republics. And it's the same thing that's happening now. So can we, is it possible for humans to make a long-lasting system that prevents this kind of despotic rule from coming? We haven't been able to do that for more than a few hundred years at any given time. So I don't know, what the design would be. Maybe technology could be a part of it. Maybe there would be some way for, I'm working on a system right now. It's called Level Check, and it is an AI evaluation of your psychological development, and it tells you basically what level you're at. And we are expanding that, and I think we're going to call it Self-Max after Self-Maximize. And it's going to be an AI life coach. So you're going to tell it about who you are and what your personality type is, and it's going to figure out your intelligence and your development and everything about you and your goals, and it'll be able to recommend you what are the next steps for you, just right outside of your comfort zone, so that you can grow. Maybe having AI will give us the ability to isolate and identify what it is about people that makes them deserve power or not. We might have at some point like a Star Trek computer that says, this person right here, beep, beep, boop, boop, this guy has been making some decisions that are, very characteristic of dragging the country down to hell. And so he's disqualified from now being a representative. It would work kind of like, what do you call it? Actuarial? Like in insurance companies, they have actuaries who use information about people like how old are you, where did you grow up, how much money do you make, do you smoke, are you married? And they take that information to determine what is the likelihood that you're going to use the insurance and how much is it going to cost, just like the Fight Club accident thing. And then they know how much to charge you for your insurance bill. Maybe we could use the same thing to select leaders. Other than that, I don't think that humanity so far has come up with a means of selecting people who are going to remain competent and benevolent. Because, in my opinion, the Founding Fathers did the best job of that that's ever been done, and that's why the United States has been so successful and has grown to such power and technological development so quickly, because they were given the right environment in which to do so. But as I think we can all see, it has decayed again into what people are calling a democracy, which really means just every individual group is sticking their hands out and saying mine, 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 and that's not at all what was intended here.
Yeah, it seems sort of dystopian as a solution and Black Mirror-esque, but it makes sense as a system.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, my question was largely regarding these, the entire concept of philosopher kings and benevolent despots, and whether it would be possible if this sort of, top-down system is inevitable for it to be ruled by someone that has the people's best interest in mind. And you also brought about that you believe that the people who are making decisions about the country should have something invested into it. So just as a subsequent question, is it a bad thing that more and more people are beginning to rent houses instead of purchasing them and just sort of living these lives where they're easily replaceable?
Yeah, that's a bad thing. I don't think that there's anything valuable at all about making people and their lives disposable, their investment in their community disposable. Being able to, to tell people, oh, you didn't pay your rent, so now you don't have a home. What ever happened to the idea of owning a home and having a family home and giving it to your kids? We're all just renters? If you own a home, the government considers you a tenant, and if you don't pay your taxes, they take your home. So in what sense do you own it? I don't understand how anybody can feel like they own property if your property can be taken away if you don't pay a bill. Who are you paying a bill to? So the idea that we, don't have the ability, like our system doesn't give us the ability to purchase or build or create a home that is just ours, that we can have and do whatever we want with, without having to constantly pay for it or be kicked out of it, and then pass it down from generation to generation. It's one of the many steps that it turns us all into renters, and renters are transigent. They're transient rather. They like you say, they pick up and move, they evaporate, they go away. And when more people are living lives like that you move in, you live a while, you move out, they don't get to know each other, they don't get to know their communities, they don't build. Again, no skin in the game. They're just there to. This is something that has been a major complaint about pretty much every major city that I've heard of in the last few decades, especially San Francisco. People say that it's not the same city anymore because people will move in and then make their money and then leave, and they didn't contribute anything. They just sucked money out of the system and left. And I don't see how it's possible for a system to continue with more and more people being like that, rather than encouraging people to settle and create communities. That's just not how humanity works. We are not individual items. We're not like Lego blocks. We're not a Build-A-Bear. People live in communities, and if people are constantly, if everything is so liquid or even gaseous, where moving in and out is so common, community is all but dead. And then where do we get our identity? You get it, from the phone, and then it's this horrible, janky, broken identity made of products, and it's a nightmare world.
Just another follow-up question very quickly, because I know I'm way past my turn for my co-host.
Mhm.
But I've
Mhm.
noticed what you were saying about this, like sort of being a gradual process. Do you think
Mhm.
that there was some sort of, not only as Jordan said, that sort of plan behind it, but that it accelerated throughout the years, where in the Industrial Revolution a lot of people became interchangeable in terms of their jobs. Then after World War II in the 1960s, a lot of people began renting homes rather than owning them and passing them on for their families. And now people themselves in social relationships are in dating, as you say, as you speak about on your channel. Your name is the name of your channel is Hoe Math.
Yep.
People themselves are becoming interchangeable, where you have one person that you pretty much use for sex, another person that you use for attention, and then at
Yep.
any moment, if any of them go away, you just replace them. Do you think that
Yep.
process is accelerating? It's related.
Accelerating, yes, but I think as a part of your question, you asked if I think it's intentional, and again, the degree to which it's intentional, I can't really say. I tend towards conspiratorial thinking for sure. Whenever I see something like that going on, and I go, oh, this thing is getting worse and worse year by year, and it's getting worse in the same way. It seems like, well, that's not a natural progression. There must be people designing this. There must be people sitting down and designing this somewhere. But then I check on what I actually know. Like, I'm just very good at knowing what I know and what I don't know. And I don't know who is doing that and what their names are and what the decisions are that they're making. And I'm not capable of knowing that. So the idea of it all being, like a conspiracy that has been sort of designed for hundreds of years, where they some angels fell from the sky or something and said, okay, we're going to tell these people this for 100 years and then that for 100 years, and then we're going to move them all around, and then we give them the phones, and then that whole idea of that being what's going on. I mean, it's certainly not impossible, but I don't have enough information to know any of that. The only thing that I know is what appears to be happening to me, and then when I check with other people, what appears to be happening to them. So I'm not sure if I lost the plot of the question. It was like,
Yeah,
is this engineered,
yeah, for
basically?
sure. So the main question wasn't whether it's intentional, but I'm glad you answered that, because I was
Yeah,
begging to sort of ask that in the future. The
yeah.
main point was, do you think it's a process? Like at first, jobs became disposable, then homes became disposable, now people themselves are becoming a victim of this.
Yeah, well, for sure, it has been going in that direction. I think that much is clear. And do I think it's a process? Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to keep getting worse, if that's what you're asking. It seems like that ball has been rolling down the hill faster and faster, and now we're getting to a point where, the suicide rate is climbing, and people are screaming out loud. They're screaming about, here's why the suicide rate is climbing. And then people go, no, it's not. And then they go, why are there so many suicides? Like, people are telling you and you're ignoring them. And then you go, well, what's happening? So there is this very jarring disconnect between what we can observe happening and what we understand about it, because people don't want to face reality. There's certain answers they just don't want. It's like it's kind of like the same thing as someone might say, "How do I lose weight?" And you go, "Stop eating food," and they go, "No, no, no. I mean, like, really, how do you lose weight? Oh, stop eating food and exercise more. No, 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 no. I mean, like, I want a real answer." They won't take the answer. So I think that there is definitely a lot of disconnection involved in the way that we apprehend the situation that is leading to the cheapening of people's lives. People will say, here's what is happening to me, and here's why my life is not good, and people will dismiss it and then say, why don't you make your life better? Well, I already told you. Well, yeah, but ignore that. Just go do it. So yeah, people have become cheapened to each other, and people don't care for each other as much. And I don't know what the next step is, but it seems like it's gone. It seems like there's a directional arrow to it for sure.
Awesome, thanks, man. I'm gonna pass this over to Jordan because I know he has a lot of comments on this since he has sort of expertise in it, and I've been pretty much like ghosting him for a while now. So Jordan, go ahead.
No worries, man. No worries, Jacob. But what I was going to ask actually is in relation to something that you briefly touched on earlier. So earlier you touched on your levels check system of assessing one's cognitive development and levels of personal growth. And as I understand, this assessment is informed not only by your academic background in developmental psychology, I believe, but also by Ken Wilber's integral theory. This very complex, fascinating theory, which encompasses an astonishingly wide range of fields and theoretical approaches, including really, really dense, kind of abstract fields like epistemology, phenomenology, metaphysics, right? And everything in between, essentially. So could you explain the significance of Wilbur's integral theory to your work, to human intellectual activity in general, and to our personal lives? How can we apply this very abstract and dense theory and transmute it to the more practical or tangible level? And why is it relevant and important? I mean, it seems quite interesting.
Sure. So the relevance of integral theory to what I'm doing is it provides a framework. Just write down integral. It collects together a lot of different aspects of study. It's not really a study in itself. It's more like a framework of study. So it uses, AQAL is what they call it, AQAL, and that's all quadrants, all levels, and then it's lines, states, types, quadrants, levels, lines, states, types. Some people argue about whether or not the lines are a real thing. It's like a multiple intelligences thing, and it really actually is multiple applications of intelligence. But that's neither here nor there. The framework provides the most sophisticated ability I've ever seen in anything to understand what is going on in any particular discipline and to diagnose where it's coming from. So when you find, the developmental level of what somebody is doing and talking about, it gives you a lot of information about what has already been done at that developmental level and what you can expect and the ways that you can expect them to think. And then when you apply quadrants to it, you can see what is missing in the approach. Like, for example, I spoke to somebody recently about rates of men and women cheating, of husbands and wives cheating on their partners. And I was presented with some scientific data, which would go up here, like this is what people report doing. And they're observing that. That's something that you would look at as a scientist. And you would say, okay, this is the data we got. But then you would have to look here and you'd have to go, well, how do we trust the data? How do we know that it's accurate? Because these are surveys that are being reported. And what's disappointing to me about modern science and their failure to, incorporate phenomenology is that they go back over here to answer that question. They go back to the external and they go, oh, well, we compared this data to this data, and so they're consistent or whatever, and we trust it. Maybe I just don't understand what it is that they did. That could be. Maybe I have more reading to do. But I believe that what happened there was they actually failed to understand that their own understanding of the situation may have colored their interpretation of the data, and the respondents themselves may have had reasons that were unseen for answering the questions in a way that would make the data, essentially useless. Like there are different people lie about different things for different reasons. And one of the frustrating answers I get from people is, why would they lie? Well, I mean, why would you lie? Have you never lied about anything stupid? You never lied to yourself about something? you've never done something so dumb you wanted to forget it and you lied to yourself. Like, we all do that all the time. And without a proper understanding of how all these things work, and this is the, the individual, and this is the collective, and this is the inside, and this is the outside. Without a proper understanding of all of these aspects of how people think, you're going to miss something, and you're going to come up with broken answers. You're going to come up with, like, our solution to the homelessness problem is something I complain a lot about. If they applied integral theory to it, they probably would actually get a solution that would reduce the homeless problem, reduce crime, stop spending money on it. They probably would get better effects. But instead what they're doing is they're picking their favorite, partial piece of it. Like, if they've got a puzzle here, they're just picking their favorite pieces out, and they're saying, we like this, this, and this piece. And every time you give them an answer that comes from a different spot, they go, no, that's wrong, that's evil, that's classist, or whatever. And they go back to the same thing that has been making the problem worse, which I think we can all agree is definitely happening in major city centers. So the reason that I find it so powerful is because it creates more effective and more complete answers that I think actually can move people up the spiral if they understand it directly. Was that a full answer to the question? I'm sorry if I forgot the whole question.
That was a good answer, but could you just expand a little bit more on how specifically it applies to this system you developed called levels check to gauge one's levels of psychological development?
Yes, of course. So the way that we integrated it into level check was we told the AI, or the developers I'm working with, they instructed the AI to use all of the literature that has been published around levels. There's Spiral Dynamics, and there is Robert Keegan, and there's Maslow, and all these people who have studied developmental psychology. And they basically told the AI to read all of this literature, and then when you answer there are basically essay questions that you answer, and when you answer them, the system will take your response and measure it by what level it thinks you're at, and then it'll come back and it'll ask you a question that is like a level or half a level higher, and it repeats that until you stay at the same level for a few answers or something like that, and then it tells you, yeah, here's what you got. Here's the level that you are answering questions at right now. So it basically, we're at a point where AI can understand the research. It's mostly phenomenological research. In my understanding, it's looking at people and listening to how they experience things that causes constitutes the research. And we're able to use that to have the AI understand it and then evaluate you according to how you speak. So that's the way that we've plugged it in. And we intend to plug in the other elements, not just levels, but the quadrants and types are going to be very important ones as well. And that's going to be coming in the next iteration, I believe, of the service.
Perfect.
Yeah.
That was a very clear, comprehensive answer. But one thing because we talked about how phenomenology is relevant to this theory. Earlier, you mentioned that you think modern science, for the most part, has failed to incorporate phenomenology, and I actually do agree with you on that. I'm reminded here of theorists like philosophers like Heidegger that made similar criticisms. But could you just expand on that from your perspective, because it certainly seems to be very important. I mean, are the technocratic and bureaucratic procedures that dominate our society operate off of these, scientific sort of mathematical processes? So I think it's important to understand how it fails to incorporate phenomenology.
Sure. So the answer that I gave to the last question, or maybe the one before, about how they ignore, the mental state or the emotional composition of people answering the questions, and also the researchers themselves, they don't look at their own presumptions. They don't look at their own assumptions. They don't look at their own culture necessarily when answering the questions. In my opinion, and again, I haven't been doing reading for quite a while, but in my opinion, most science, contemporary science, believes that there is an objective reality. that you can observe reality and that is just the observation and that is how it is. And that is the same for everyone. And so if the answer is this for me, then the answer will be that for you. And it really isn't true, because the way that we compose reality and our minds is different. And the only way that we can share knowledge is by checking with my mind and your mind to see if that works. Now, when you're talking about something like how heavy is this block of lead, there's not going to be a lot of argument. You just weigh it and it's like, oh, it's 8 pounds. And now you weigh it. Oh, it's 8 pounds. And now you weigh it. It's 8 pounds. Okay, well, this is an 8-pound block of lead. We all agreed on that. We measured it several times. But when we're talking about something as sophisticated as, how do we tell who's lying and who is most likely to be infidelitus and who is, what do we trust in terms of like political solutions? We have people basing laws that affect our lives, really deeply affect our lives, based off of, science that may just be a collection of opinions. And it may be something that is, there was some guy who made a TikTok the other day that said 90 whatever % of science agrees with whoever funded the science. And I'm not sure to what extent that's affecting it. So the way that the liberal arts and the social sciences create what they call science is very heavily affected by the observer. And I don't see very much recognition of that in the science itself. They treat their conclusions as if they are objectively real and all in the upper right quadrant here. Whereas if they included who they are and why they think what they think and, other perspectives on the data, the answer wouldn't be so simple, because the social sciences are the science of the mind, and the mind is not observable. The only way you can observe someone's mind is through them telling you. And when they tell you, which would be upper right quadrant, you hear what they say, you are then reinterpreting it in your own mind. And you're not including your mind as a part of the experiment. So you can't treat that as objective data, but they do, at least I think.
Interesting. Yeah, I think we should definitely be wary then of constantly applying the quantitative methods of the natural sciences to the social sciences, and it seems like it won't really be that simple. Yeah. I think you agree with that. Well, in that case, then I'll pass it to my good friend. I know he's been chomping at the bit to ask you a question. So go ahead, man.
So thank you, Hoe Math, for giving us the significance of Ken Wilbur's theory and your understanding of it. Yeah. Just speaking of thinkers or philosophers in general, on our channel, we do a lot of philosophy focus. So we discuss philosophers like Nick Land, Friedrich Nietzsche, Martin Heidegger, Julius Evola, Alexander Dugin, etc. Yep. So I'm wondering, what thinkers or philosophers have you read that are kind of outside of the major psychological canon, like Maslow or Piaget, that have had a significant impact on you? So maybe not that you've read extensively, but just whose ideas you've been exposed to. And maybe you can drop in some recommendations for our viewers and your viewers.
Yeah, for sure. So you mentioned Evola, and he's a very contentious figure. I had some accusations thrown at me recently when I read Evola. There is a contingency of people who, I insult them a lot. I call them a lot of bad names on Twitter. And they're this type of person who they not only do they have a political agenda, but they also are so unconscious and so unintelligent about the way that they go on their crusades that they're book burners. So if you Evola had said some things that are very unpopular in our time. And so if you read Evola and then you tell other people to read it, these people assume that you agree with what you read and you want other people to agree with what you read. That you can't just read something for the sake of reading it and understanding what the author thought and consider the idea. I think it was it Aristotle or someone who said that the mark of an educated mind is the ability to entertain an idea without accepting or rejecting it. I put a recommendation to read Ride the Tiger in my video Self-Maximize. And I had somebody come at me and say, I must be a fascist then because Evola said that he was a fascist. So they're not able to differentiate between reading something and like agreeing with and prescribing that thing. Evola, to answer your question directly, was probably, at least recently, one of the more out there philosophers that I have read. I found his work to be really refreshing because he comes from a perspective that's so discouraged in our time, and that's breaking away from the current of the times is how you become educated. It's how you become an intellectual. You have to be able to think in a way that opposes the style of the time. I think the most important thing that I learned from Evola was that, most people think of capitalism and communism as being in opposition, but they actually are both just different ways of privileging the material over the spiritual. So those are systems that focus on material distribution, which is like satanic. Human life is not about creating material and distributing material. Material is about supporting human life. It should be the way we live that matters. So that kind of spiritual bent to philosophical texts is something that I have been searching for in recent years. As far as classical philosophers, I have not very often in my life sat down and read a whole anthology. I read Camus, a couple of things by Camus, The Stranger. I don't think he's outside of the mainstream. I think a lot of people have read Camus. I've read a little bit of Nietzsche here and there, Plato, Aristotle, Socrates, collections of works or what have you. Ken Wilbur, obviously, he's considered a philosopher to some extent. I also consider in the same realm spiritual writings like Alistar Crowley. I've read a lot of stuff in that area. And I also consider, like Scott Adams has a book that I recommend all the time called Win Bigly. And it's all about how Trump won the 2016 election by being what he calls a master persuader and being able to distort reality around him as he goes. And it's that kind of being able to get beneath the surface of reality and show people what's going on in the quieter, more hidden parts of reality that I consider philosophy. And it's my understanding that Scott Adams has gotten some trouble recently too. So I'm really digging myself a hole with these people I'm recommending. But but for sure, yeah. I guess if the question is who have I read who's the most out there. Evola would top the list, and then Crowley and Scott Adams is mainstream still, but I just like the way that he approaches the topics. I'm thinking about what's on my list and what I should mention. I'll try and click it open while I answer the next question.
Yeah, I see. But I think you've given a very comprehensive overview of what you've gained from Evola, and I think you mentioned, or you made very good points with regard to just looking into the more hidden, so to speak, thinkers, that are not as conventional. I mean, especially in the social milieu of what's considered acceptable. I mean, Evola is a very good example of someone that goes against that. And I mean, that's the reason as to why he's so contentious. You also mentioned Alistar Crowley, and I have heard that you mentioned directly that you've had experience with Crowley, and obviously there are some things that are also unconventional regarding him and what he did.
For sure.
I mean, compared to, what's socially acceptable today. So could you give an elaboration of what influence Crowley has had on you and the religion of Thelema, or
for sure. So basically the way that I ended up at Crowley is I just, for whatever reason, it's very difficult to get into in a short amount of time, but for whatever collection of reasons, I decided at some point in my life that I had to get as weird as possible, and I had to get as far from the mainstream as possible and wander off the beaten path and understand what were the secrets. What are the secrets of life? This ended me up at, magic and Alistar Crowley stuff, pentagrammy, witchy stuff. And, I met some people who did rituals and some people who belonged to this religion called Thelema, which means will, like love and will. Thelema, agape, is will and love. And the effect that Crowley and other such writers have had on me is those sort of spiritual writings have an effect that I'm not sure how to describe the value of it, but it is definitely outside of and perhaps even beyond the effects that you get from reading philosophy or Persuasion or 48 Laws of Power or something like that. I'm not sure how I would describe it, but it's different in a way. Like, it moves your mind into a place that is unverifiable. It seems like it's real, but it seems like it's not real. Like, the reason that they call it magic is because supposedly the way that you use your mind can affect your own world through unseen means. That's how magic supposedly works. You focus your mind, you do a ritual, you do a thing, you believe a thing, and through your belief in the thing, through your personal experience, almost like the quantum, the double slit experiment, where when you're looking at it, it collapses, and when you're not, it's a wave. It's almost like what magic is a way of training your mind to collapse reality into what you want it to be. And that concept is so fascinating. I spent, years and years reading about it, and I studied the people who got into it, and it gets dark really fast. There was a guy named Michael Aquino or whatever, Aquino, and he, I think, founded, was it the Temple of Set? And he wrote something called, he wrote about black magic, and he was a high-ranking officer in the United States military. That's really creepy. So when you get into this, magic stuff and this reality affecting stuff, you kind of sometimes find people who are in really high places. Alistar Crowley himself, ostensibly, I'm not sure if I verified this, but I think that he worked with Churchill in MI6 in World War II in order to use his mind stuff and magical stuff against Hitler and in intelligence operations. And if that's true, that is, speaks quite a lot about whether or not there's something to this. So I spent a lot of time reading these things and playing around with them to see if there was anything to them, and the answers I got are really fuzzy. That's what I like about it, is it's when you kind of leave a verifiable world and enter a world that's permanently mysterious. And that is, man, you want a challenge, go study something that you can't ever prove is true. It's like permanently just no distinction. It's like synchronicity, that no matter how far you get into it, no matter how much you learn about it, it looks like just Fantasyland weirdo stuff. But then also, the more that you learn about it, the more it seems like powerful people are into it.
That's a very metaphysical argument, but yeah, we agree.
Yeah.
Jordan, is there anything else you would like to say? Because
No.
we've been at this podcast for quite a while.
Yeah. We've been running for over an hour, touched on a lot of really interesting and important points. What I'd say is it's interesting that these these fields like occultism and esotericism get relegated, like you said, to the loony bin, so to speak. They're not really considered to be very serious. Most academics won't really be interested in them or touch them at all. But if you actually look at the most powerful people in our society, the people that are involved in the military-industrial complex and the government, in these bureaucratic institutions that control our lives, isn't it crazy that many of them are actually highly interested in this? I mean, you brought up Michael Aquino. That's a case I've actually heard of. He definitely, I think he had ties either with some intelligence agencies, or I know he was involved with the government and he ran some type of psychological operations. And it's just crazy to think that someone that's that powerful is actually, basically an occultist, like a literal black magic occultist. I mean, do you think that the elites and the people in power are actually aware of these principles that you're talking about, your thoughts become your reality in these ancient occult principles?
Yeah, for sure. So from what I understand and from what I've been able to gather, I think that it's highly likely that some more powerful people do subscribe to these philosophies, especially Thelema. You see the number 93 come up a lot. You see, magic numbers come up a lot. You see them using references to certain things. It does seem like there are people. I think the strongest link that I've ever seen was, what was her name? Marina Marina Abramovich.
Yeah.
Once you know who she is and how old she is and what she looks like and who she hangs out with, that's a pretty clear link. That's like, okay, this is like a woman who does witchy blood magic, right? And she's hanging out with Hillary Clinton and Jay-Z and, you know, all the, like, everyone who have nothing to do with each other except that they're famous and powerful and rich. That seems like kind of a red flag. So I think that just from what I've seen, you know, in my studies, I think it's highly likely that there's a lot of, you know, magic-y beliefs hanging out in the upper classes, in the elite classes. But of course, I'm not able to put too fine of a point on it. I do know that if you look at Google Maps and you go look at the White House, that it is on top of an upside down pentagram.
Oh wow!
And that pentagram is facing north, which is the way that they have it face in satanic rituals. Usually, you have the right side up pentagram facing. Oops, I did it wrong. You have it facing east because that's the rising sun, and north is the coldest place because it's towards the North Pole. So they have the upside down pentagram facing north, and that's in Washington D.C.
Wow.
And that's not the only geographical, architectural curiosity. If you look closer at the White House, there's an owl on top of it, and then they have the Washington Monument is an obelisk, and it's got nothing to do with Washington. It's an obelisk that's in a Vesica Pisces, and that is that's symbolic of sex magic. That's the lingam and the yoni together. There's magical symbols in the streets in Washington D.C. So, you know, the more that you get it, that you look into this stuff, the more that it's right in front of you, but you never find out what it means. It's just symbols. It's just symbols, and it's just people with strange connections. And then, you know, you get into the Gmail. The old Gmail logo was the Masonic apron. You find out things like this, and it's like, okay, this is too many coincidences. It can't be just my imagination at this point. You can't have the Masonic apron being the Gmail logo and DC being an upside down pentagram and this, and, you know, Hillary Clinton knows Marina Abramovich and so does Bill Gates, right? It just, the only way to connect the dots is that something funny's going on.
Wow. I mean,
You've described it in a better way than we have in a lot of our videos. You mentioned that you had some ending notes and some things that you wanted to mention before the end of the podcast. I'd be interested in hearing that.
Do I have something to mention?
Yeah, because you mentioned earlier, I think it was around 10 or 20 minutes ago, that you were going to check if you have something more you wanted to elaborate on.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I was just going to check out my reading list to see if I had any more names for you. I've read LaVey, Anton LaVey, and Zena LaVey. I read the Satanic Witch, and I put that to use. It's not as bad as it sounds. It's basically like how to use image to get people to think about you what they want. There was Don Milo Luquette, Babylon. I think it was, is it Luquette? I don't know. I tried to find my list and it's kind of sloppy.
Mm-hmm.
Evola wrote something on Crowley, actually.
He did.
But I was just looking for my reading list and it's a little bit uncoordinated. So, read Carl Jung.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Psychoanalysis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, and one more, Luntz, Frank Luntz, Luntz. That guy was a persuasion researcher, and he, I believe that he's the reason that we started calling it climate change instead of global warming.
Oh, wow.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yep.
There's definitely a lot more to dig into for persuasion, but we've been at this for quite a while. Yeah. So, Hoe Math, if you could stick around for just a couple of minutes at the end as we finalize things about this podcast, but I think we've answered all the questions that we have. Jordan and Flying Deval, do you have anything more to add?
No, I'll just say, I mean, that was such a thorough exposition of the occult symbolism in government that, bro, I hope the CIA doesn't put you on some list, man, because...
Yeah, you know, if I'm getting on, I'm on already, and they're smart enough to know there's nothing I can do.
Yeah, I mean, you exposed all the psyops right there, man. So thank you for that. But in general, we touched on some, as Jacob said, we touched on a lot of terrain, a lot of really interesting and relevant topics. So thank you. I mean, thank you for all your insight and wisdom.
For sure. Thank you so much.
Topics, especially with that exposition of all the I guess magical psyops in the government. Also, I found particularly insightful of what you said is just to be more comfortable with basically things that are not necessarily part of the puzzles that you take out of the bigger picture, just to see or check how you're thinking, because I mean, just if you want to study Evola, for instance, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to take everything that he thought and just assimilate yourself into his worldview. I mean, that's not necessarily part of what he's saying, but what you can certainly do is just take his valid points or just the points that are very relevant and try to at least consider incorporating them into how you see the world. Because I mean, that's just the key of what intelligent people do.
Yeah.
Well said, man. Well said.
Exactly.
Okay.
I mean, Jacob, I think that about wraps it up.
Are you tired yet? The modern world wears us down. We work jobs we hate so that we can buy shit that we don't need. Luckily, we're here to give people an outlet. The content you're watching was produced by the Scorpion Movement, a decentralized collective with many members across the globe voicing a consistent message. We've had enough. Our members span all religions, nationalities, and political affiliations, and we share one goal in common. We're tired of the hegemony of the Western world. The constant drive for consumer goods, press hostilities towards brotherly nations, decreasing attention spans, rising obesity and divorce rates, wealth inequality, and rising male loneliness are all a symptom of the same root cause: modernity. The people who control this planet fear two things: the spread of true information and men of action. The Scorpion Movement is building an intricate network able to survive cancellation attempts, bans, and attempts to restrict our message. We are the first movement of our kind, aiming to educate and help young people break free of the pressures of society. Learn to cook, learn to fight, to code, to love, to build, make money online, create art, fend for yourself, find like-minded people, and craft a purpose in life. Stop drifting around aimlessly in a world of hedonistic pleasure, and learn to resist the forces that tie you down. History will prove us right.
The Scorpion Movement, Telegram, Discord, and other links below.